those are basically the ways that it works. John, are we back to live?
Can you hear me well now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I apologize immensely for that. Thank you, Ann. Appreciate you sharing that. What else do you want to share about the educator in crisis situation?
That is pretty much it. As you know, for those of us, I know we have people from out of state that always tune into this, and thank you very much. That is basically it. As you know, Hurricane Ian gave a big miss to the Tampa Bay area, and also where Sharon is up in Hernando. And Edwina, for once, was not in the corner of the catcher's mitt, as I call the panhandle of Florida. So she also was able to avoid it. Unfortunately, some of our members are in dire straits. I have friends that live down there that are in dire straits. It is still an ongoing crisis down there and will be for years, as Edwina could tell you from Hurricane Michael and also Ivan going through their part of the world. It's just something that is a long-term recovery, and that's why we want people to know that this grant is in position and the foundation is helpfully able to help you in some way alleviate some of the financial burdens while you wait for insurance companies to kick in and things like that. And that's pretty much all that I have on that. The website has more information. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. It's anne@frea.org, and or just go on the website and email through the website, and we will get your email that way. And that's pretty much it, John. As I said, I'm okay for a few more minutes to stay here, and I'll put chat up if somebody wants to ask me a question, but I will have to leave at 1:30 with another technology individual entering my office.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate that. Let's talk about our unit spotlight in Hernando County REA, and that is Sharon Twyman, who is joining us today. Good afternoon, Sharon. How are you today?
Good afternoon, John, and all the participants. I'm doing well, thank you, and I hope all of you are too.
Tell me about your unit, and then tell me kind of a little bit about your special project that you worked on.
Okay, unit, as was explained, is Brooksville, and we are a little bit north of Tampa. Some of you may have seen the famous icon for us is Weeki Wachee Mermaids. But anyway, our unit recently participated in a food distribution. The host of the distribution is Mid-Florida Community Services, and that nonprofit pretty much covers everything from early pre-K to Meals on Wheels for seniors. So it has a wide span of services. This particular food distribution started, as we all know, with COVID. That's how it came about, and it is a drive-by, no contact with any of the participants that come through. Basically, what happens is a truck pulls in. It's once a month. The truck pulls in, as you can see in the picture. Our truck comes out of Jacksonville. And it arrives around 9:30, and the driver unloads the food with a forklift. And then it's stacked up under a covered area. We use an empty lot that used to be a car lot. So it has a good patio area. Thankfully, we're not in the sun or the rain, whatever. But he unloads the truck with the forklift and stacks it by item. If it's fresh produce, you have to wear gloves to touch the food. Typically, every month there is some sort of fresh produce. This particular month it was bananas, like a bunch of bananas. But the canned goods and the other stuff, you do not have to wear gloves. The cars line up once we have the food all stacked out. And there's no questions asked of the driver except how many people in your family. And that tells us how many bags of food to give them. We either put it in the back seat or in the trunk, whatever their preference is. And sometimes it could be one driver, but they'll say, I'm picking up for 3 families. Perhaps they live in a campground or they live in a trailer park and not everyone has a car. So we don't question any of that. They just tell us how many they're feeding. And as you can see in the top left picture, those bags have like the dried produce and canned goods in them. And so when the car comes up, they're asked how many are in the family. They tell us 3 or however many, and that tells us how many bags to put in their car. They typically get a meat, some sort of fresh produce, and then canned goods. And as you can see, they had a real treat this month. We gave them eggs, and a lot of people were excited about those eggs. But like I said, it's typically some vegetables, dried beans, or some sort of lentil, and the other items. 1 month there was a whole chicken that they got. This month it was canned salmon was the meat that we had.
How many families do you usually see on one of these each month?
Typically, well, the car line wraps around for hours. They line up ahead of time. And we either stop when there's no cars or stop when there's no food. And thankfully, I've not volunteered. And the week that our unit did it, we did not run out of food. We ran out of cars first.
Okay.
But what happens when there's leftover food, we take it to the shelters here in town. Like there's a New Beginnings Youth Shelter. There's a Jericho Road shelter for men. So none of the food goes to waste. We distribute it to other nonprofits. But in the picture, you can see our unit, how many people showed up. Those are all retired educators, and some spouses came. It's very heartwarming to see the smiles on the people's faces when you give them food. It was very
absolutely. Sharon, tell me a little bit about your unit. How big is it, and how often do you meet? Where do you meet? That kind of stuff. If somebody knows in your area, they can come join you.
Oh, yes, sir. We meet every other month because we're a fun group. And so, for example, if we meet in October, like we did for the symposium, then next month we're going to take a field trip and we're going to go have fun. So every other month we either have a meeting or a field trip. Our next field trip, we're visiting an alpaca farm and a new mermaid encounter that opened up. So it's usually we're kind of off because we had our symposium. We meet on a Tuesday, but a lot of times our field trips won't exactly be on that day because it depends on when the place is open or however many can go.
Okay. Will you do me a favor, put in chat the best way to contact you? That way, if somebody's out there, they want to find out how they can get involved and go on a field trip and go see an alpaca, which would be kind of cool.
Yes.
To reach out to you that way. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today and being the unit spotlight. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. My name is John Green, and I work with Association Member Benefit Advisors. I live a little bit north of Houston with my wife, who is a second grade teacher, and my kids are all in their college and adult ages. But I've spent the better part of my career working with active educators, helping them understand what their retirement years look like. So I appreciate the opportunity to join you today. I apologize for any of the technical difficulties to start here. I'm actually in our home office in Austin. Came over this morning, and so I appreciate you joining us today. We're going to jump in and talk a little bit about this situation about protecting your nest egg, but just a quick reminder, what your association does for you to watch out for your pension and to preserve any type of benefits that you receive and keep you connected is so vital today. We saw this coming out of COVID, how important it was, and Ann was one of the leading associations to keeping members together, either meeting via Zoom, meeting in person through these symposiums, through the conventions, things like that. So vitally important. And then to pair up with us at AMBA to offer you important discounts, benefits, fun stuff, freebies, things like that as well. It's so important with what FREA does on your behalf. We have three leaders who surround the state of Florida, and Eric, Alexander, and Sam. And I know you've met some of them, definitely met Alexander, but they work serving retired educators and retired state employees all across the Southeast, and they're able to help you in your units as well. Just a couple of quick reminders. AMBA has partnered up with FREA to bring you some benefits that may fill gaps when you left the schoolhouse that you didn't take with you. They're portable if you leave the state for whatever reason. We have a lot of folks that join us on these calls talking about they've moved closer to the grandkids and things like that. You don't have to worry about these benefits, go with you wherever you go. But we also see a lot of members who will take benefits and extend them to their parents or their adult children who are not eligible for their benefits because they've aged out of it or they're never eligible before. So many of our retired members have a second job. Some of the younger ones do. And having proper planning on their parents could also help prevent them from taking extended time off. So we're going to jump in today and talk about protecting your nest egg. And we're going to kind of go through and look at what makes up your retirement nest egg. For those of you who are in your true retirement years, we're going to look at the 5 biggest threats to your nest egg based off an article I read on USA Today several years ago, and what you can do to protect yourself against those threats and how to have peace of mind and make the most of your endorsed options. So let's jump in here today and talk about the 3 components of a truly stable retirement. The biggest thing you have, and the thing that makes your membership in FREA so valuable, just the small amount that you pay per month in your dues protects your biggest asset, and that's your pension. Your pension is something, the way that it's set up in Florida, you can't outlive, and that's great. So you've got your pension as one of your legs of your retirement stool, for lack of a better term. Then you have Social Security, and we all know there's some changes going on with Social Security for the positive in this next year. We'll talk about that in a couple of our other webinars coming up. And then you've got this third leg, which is your other savings. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. How do you make sure that that third leg of your retirement stool remains stable so that you don't have to worry about anything wobbling in your retirement years? So what is your nest egg? Your nest egg is not your active pension. You're always going to receive that. It's not yours or your spouse's Social Security, depending upon how you receive your Social Security. It's really not your mattress money, you know, that little extra cash that you've got saved away for emergencies, things like that. And it's not a structured settlement. If you've ever had an insurance claim or something of that nature, or you get a payment from them periodically, those things aren't your nest egg. We're talking about your 403Bs, any 401Ks or IRAs, or cash balance pension plans, not your regular pension plan, but maybe a spouse's cash balance pension plan, CDs, money market savings, things like that, or inheritances. We're talking about those things that are outside of your normal stream of income or your emergency money. So let's talk about this and jump in and kind of give you the top 5 threats from a USA Today article from about 6 years ago. And the top 5 threats we're going to explore today to your nest egg are taking care of elderly parents. So you still have parents living, this is an issue for you. But for those of you who you are the elderly parents, this can really be an issue for your children and your grandchildren. Another threat is the death of a spouse without life insurance, boomerang children or children who move back home with you, a medical crisis, and then overexposure to the stock market as we get older in our retirement years. So we're going to jump in and kind of go through each one of them real briefly, cover with you what that threat is, and then talk about some of the solutions to those threats. The number one biggest threat to your retirement nest egg is taking care of elderly parents. Now, as I mentioned, whether you are the elderly parents or you still have parents that are living, the requirement or the need to take care of a loved one is great. And really about 73% of all long-term care is given in-home by informal caregivers who receive no compensation. And what that means, it usually falls upon the daughters in the family or the daughter-in-laws. They have to quit their job or change their lifestyle to take care of mom or the mother-in-law. And so it can greatly impact not only their living situation, but also their income and their retirement income. So think about this. If we're all educators, you have a daughter who's an educator, and she has to stop her career to take care of you. Well, that means that she not only doesn't have the income coming into the household, it also means that it could stunt her pension whenever she's ready to retire as well. So this greatly impacts females in the family. And the whole concept of taking care of elderly parents, because Medicare really doesn't provide for that, is something that can truly scramble your nest egg. And so there are some solutions out there. One of those is long-term care insurance that provides for someone to come to your home or for you to go to an assisted living facility or a nursing home, something like that, to provide care for you so that either your daughter or daughter-in-law or son or son-in-law doesn't have to take time off of work. You don't have to move. You can stay where you want to, things like that. Oftentimes people will do a hybrid of this. They'll have their own personal assets with some type of a care plan. And so that can help prevent you from having to dip all the way in, because you can't call the pension board and say, hey, double up my pension payment. I have to go to a nursing home. Or you can't call up Social Security and say, I need some more money because I'm having a home health nurse come out to my house town to take care of me, that type of thing. So it's really important that you understand that there are some significant scramblers of your nest egg when it comes to taking care of elderly parents or you being taken care of, but there are some solutions that are out there, usually in the long-term care arena or a hybrid of long-term care and personal assets. Another one is spouses who pass away without any life insurance. And about 2 in 5 or 1 in 10, about 10% of us would feel a true financial pinch in the first 6 months after the death of a loved one. And so having life insurance, however big or small, can help prevent your spouse from having to dip into their retirement savings to pay for housing, medical, college expenses for kids, things of that nature. And having that life insurance can really make a difference. There are a couple of endorsed solutions that FREA offers. There are just some final expense life insurance, some guaranteed issue life insurance. And then it's a way for you to replace your pension. Many retirees, because they need as much cash as possible, will take out the maximum option that they have on their pension plan, which basically says that whenever you pass away, your beneficiary receives 0. And so once you lock that in, you can't make those changes out there. And so you may be rolling along receiving X amount of dollars, but once you or your spouse pass away, that would go to 0. And so you can use life insurance as a means to replace that pension or to replace that Social Security that you wouldn't be receiving as a result of your spouse being alive. The third biggest way that can really scramble your nest egg is a medical crisis. Medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcies in the United States today. That doesn't matter if they've got private insurance, anything through the healthcare exchange or through Medicare. There are so many expenses outside of Medicare, the healthcare exchange, and private insurance that are not covered. And usually it's in relationship to cancer care recovery, to stroke care recovery, heart attack recovery, things like that. That usually is about 60% of expenses. Many times when I'm flying back and forth to Florida, back into Houston, I'm meeting people that are flying to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, and those expenses aren't covered. Now the treatment may be covered, but the travel expenses and those related things for yourself and for a loved one to travel aren't covered. And so those are things that can really scramble your nest egg, especially if you have to have a loved one or a spouse take off time to travel with you as well. That could really hurt their income in regards to that. Heart attack, stroke, those type of things are some of our top leading causes of health issues for seniors, and that can really make a dent in their nest egg. And then with Medicare and the way that sometimes Medicare Advantage plans work, there's some large deductibles in there, or there are some maximum out of pockets that are several thousands of dollars. And then what we find sometimes, and I found this with my mother, she's in a Medicare Advantage plan, had to go seek a specialist. Well, the doctor that they referred her to was outside of that Medicare Advantage network. And that was a surprise bill she wasn't expecting out there. And so this would have been a situation she could have had covered if she would have had a proper plan in place to take care of that. And that could be a cancer, heart attack, or stroke plan. There are some accident plans, and then there are some MASA plans. This is the Medical Air Services Association plan that will provide for expenses to be paid for at whatever way you want them to be. Meaning that if you have cancer, you can use this money to use however you want to for travel, for somebody to accompany you, for comfort items, things like that. If you have an ambulance trip, it will pay for anything not paid for by Medicare, which Medicare usually pays about 20%. So there's 80% that you'd be responsible for. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make up for the expenses related to a medical crisis through some proper coverage. The fourth is boomerang kids. There are more adult children who have moved back into households than ever before. We saw this a lot during COVID for two reasons. We saw it for one reason because people were either losing their job or they could work remotely and they could move back in. Or secondly, because they were taking parents out of an assisted living facility or a nursing facility because they didn't want to have them there, and they would move back into their old house, things like that. But the fact is that 52%, over half of baby boomer households with children that don't live with them, those are fully retired. That's the good group. But only 21% of boomers who have children moving back in with them are fully retired. So it could be an expense, a significant expense to have one of your children move back in with you, and that can really scramble your nest egg. So I don't really have much of a solution other than just lock the door. Don't let them back in. Maybe easier said than done. If they do come back, make them promise to be your caregiver forever. And my wife and I are just now in our very first couple of years of empty nest, and I can tell you I enjoy it. And as much as I love my children, moving back in, that thought kind of scares me a little bit. So that's kind of one of those things that can be a little bit difficult conversation, a little bit funny to talk about, but it does have an impact on our financial situation and our nest egg. The fifth one that I want to talk about, and this is really one that we're experiencing right now, is overexposure to the stock market as we age. All of us can remember back to 2008, especially those of you who live in Florida. You remember what happened when all the condo prices dropped, all the housing prices dropped, and all of that situation. The stock market went down almost 50% in just a few short months. And if you were to retired right at that point, could you have afforded to have all of your stuff, all of your retirement monies in one nest and have to worry about it dropping in half and how quickly it could climb back up? Now, thankfully, it did go back up, but if you would have locked it in at that point, you might have lost a significant amount of money. But so having a plan to protect your assets as you age is so important, because right now, interest rates are pretty low. You can't just throw it over into the bank and expect to make that kind of money, but you don't want to lose money either, especially as we move forward here. This is a look at the past 100 years, 75 years in here, and you can see the S&P 500 has gone up and down and up and down and up and down. If you retire at one point and you're not adding any money into your stock market or into your personal savings outside of that, you can see that if you retire at the wrong time, it can really make an impact on you. There are lots of things that can be of concern depending upon the timing that you retire and what you do with your money. And we saw during the coronavirus crash that the stock market lost about 30% of its value. So I mean, you could lose 30% in 2 weeks. This is a snapshot that I took back in January on my phone, and all of us have that on our phones. You've got to be able to look at your stocks and what's going on out there, and you can see that was a bad day then. It's come back just a little, but it's still lower than what this was in January. And that's money in your nest egg that you might have been expecting to live on for a long period of time, because we've got inflation and the impacts of other things that are impacting us now. This stock market can really scramble your nest egg. And the savings rates, as I mentioned, gas prices gyrating, they're still much higher than they were the past few years. Inflation continues to go up 7 to 9% every month, depending upon what's going on, the fastest since 1981. Especially those food and energy prices that impact us directly. And at the same time, we can't go over to the bank and say, hey, we want those good old days. I was listening to the radio as I was driving over to Austin, and they were talking about, remember the days when we used to have 11% CD rates? Edwin, do you remember that, when we used to get 11% on the CDs? You can't find that anywhere anymore, and so at the same time back then, also that was the interest rates for home mortgages as well. So, you've got this challenge. What do you do in an environment when your IRAs are losing money? You can't put it in the bank because you're not making enough money to keep up with inflation and the cost of gas and food. How do you protect that nest egg that you've built up over your years? One possible solution that you can never run out of income is a tax-deferred asset protection plan. And what that means is it's a plan that allows you to participate in the stock market, but you don't receive any losses. You only receive the gains, and it protects you from losing money. Most of us aren't afraid to die, about 20% of us. but well over half of us are worried about running out of money sometime in our retirement. That's our number one financial fear. And so this tax deferred asset protection plan really allows FREA members to have lifetime income, just like your pension plan, and safety. You get competitive returns if the stock market goes up, but if the stock market drops, you don't lose money. I know many of you, like me, I'd open up my quarterly statement and I don't even look at it. I just put it into a folder. I don't want to see what's at risk out there, how much I've lost. And so I kind of relate this to going to Las Vegas, and you've had a really good run at the blackjack table, but you start to lose a little bit. And so my tendency is I'm going to start betting more to get that money back. Well, what I really should do is to go to bed at night, take that money that I've made, take it off the table, at least take some of it off the table, and take my winnings and go home with that. And that's what this tax deferred asset protection plan allows you to do, to protect you from risk that way. The thing I like about it most, though, is the fact that it has some long-term care benefits inside of it. For those of you who have been on my long-term care seminars, you know my father had dementia, passed away a couple of years ago this past month from vascular dementia. He had a long-term care plan, but because of his medical history and my family health history, I don't qualify for a long-term care plan. But what I did was I took an old cash balance pension plan from a previous employer, put it into this FREA endorsed tax deferred protection plan, and it gives me long-term care benefits in two different ways. What it does for me is if I need long-term care between now and the time I start to take my money out, I can take out as much money as I want to with no penalty. But if I start to receive payments off of this plan and then I need long-term care, it will double my payments every month. So it gives me and my wife protection to know that I've got long-term care taken care of. But if I don't need any type of long-term care because we're healthy or something else happens to my wife or I haven't spent the money on a long-term care plan. I still have the money that I've saved up that I can use for my retirement as I go through here. So this plan allows you, again, all the upside of the stock market, but no downside. It gives long-term care benefits in there. So to me, it's kind of the best of both worlds with a whole lot of flexibility as we go through here. Because like I mentioned, we've got many more years to live. That's the good news. The bad news is inflation is making our dollar seem less and less each time, each year. You know, life changes, our health declines, things like that. We've got to prepare. And as you saw, those top 5 reasons can really scramble that nest egg out there. And we want to make sure that you've got the availability to protect your nest egg and to keep up with inflation so that you don't have to worry about some of those issues that are out there. So if you've got questions, I encourage you to drop them in the chat or Q&A. We've got a couple that are up here. I'll go look at that in just a moment. If you want to find out more about some of the stuff we've talked about today, I'd encourage you to take your smartphone, open up your camera feature, hover over that QR code. The little form will pop up and you can select some things on there. We'll get back to you as quickly as possible. If you're on your phone, or if you are on a smartphone or a tablet, something like that, and you can't use your camera, you can easily email me at john.green@amba.info. So let me go ahead and see what kind of questions we have out here. All right, we've asked about recording. We are recording this, and we'll have it out on the FRA website here, and probably early next week, we'll put that out there. And then, so we'll do that. Thanks for that question. Again, if you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll come back to this QR code in just a moment. Just a couple of other things out here. We have 2 more sessions that we're going to talk about the rest of the year. On the 16th of November, we're going to talk all about long-term care. We're going to go in and show you through my father's experience what I learned about long-term care. We're going to talk about some of the costs in Florida, some of the things to look out for, and some of the alternatives that are out there. And then in December 7th, when Florida has all filled up from all the snowbirds, there's so many discounts, so many different fun things out there. We're going to talk about all the different holiday discounts that are available to you through the Passport program, which is free as part of your FREA membership. So be sure to look out for the emails that Ann and FREA puts out for you prior to our webinars. And Edwina and Ann will be on here also to share some of the latest stuff with FREA as well. So again, tell your friends about FREA. Tell them about these education series. This is a great way to introduce your friends to FREA help them to understand the value of their FREA membership, not only if they're a retired educator to protect their pension and things like that, if they're not a retired educator and they can still benefit from FREA's education, let them become members, because it's a great way to support your organization, and they get a lot of great benefits out of it as well. So I encourage you to do that. So again, put your questions out there on chat or Q&A. You can email me. You can use that QR code just like we do in restaurants today. And Jeannie asked, can teachers who are still working access this on the website? Yes, as long as you're a member of FREA, you'll be able to access the website and show you exactly where the videos are, what's out there, and you can access all the resources and tools that Ann and Edwina and the FREA team have put out there for you. So it's a great question. Active educators, I would highly encourage you, tell your friends about this, simply because your coworkers, imagine there's a lot of things, Edwina, that you wish you would have known before you retired about retirement. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I have learned so much more after I retired about what I should have done before I retired. And unfortunately, that information is not getting to everyone. And I really do appreciate these seminars, John. You do a terrific job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. Martha asked, I know that Medicare does cover the cost of ambulance services, but not all the cost. When does Medicare not cover the service? Martha, that is a great question. Most ambulance providers, air providers, ground providers, so it doesn't matter if it's life flight or if it's a ground ambulance, are not part of any networks. So that means that they don't have to subscribe to what that network, be it Medicare or an HMO, PPO, says that they will reimburse for ambulance rides. So what usually happens is that Medicare pays about 20% of the cost of the ambulance. Okay, so that leaves us on the hook for about 80%. Now that can be for 5 miles, that can be $5,000. I mean, it's there's no magic number, unfortunately, for these ambulance services. What Medicare does that, I don't say concerns me, that bothers me, they have qualifying language in their Medicare guide that says Medicare may pay for your ambulance ride. And where I've seen this is say your neighbor finds you disoriented at home and they call 911, the ambulance comes and picks you up, you go to the hospital, you get checked out, whatever the situation was, you get it taken care of. Well, Medicare will go back and review that situation, and they'll say, you could have taken an Uber to the hospital, or you could have had a family member drive you to the hospital. We're not going to pay for that ambulance. So again, that's where Medicare gets a little bit tricky. So that was a tremendous question. Medicare has the ability to go back and say, no, you don't qualify. But most part, it's usually about a 20% payment that they'll make on the ambulance bills. So great question out there. Let's see what other questions have popped up in here. All right. Okay. Patricia asked, if my money's in the stock market, how can I get it in the tax deferred asset protection plan? Patricia, the best way to do that is to use that QR code and have someone like Alexander or Eric or Sam sit down and look at where that money is. Because sometimes that money could be in what's called a qualified plan, like an IRA or a 403B, where you didn't pay taxes on it beforehand. And you will have to make some different paperwork movement as opposed to if it was in kind of a Roth IRA or some kind of CD money market account. So each different plan is different. The one thing that you'll want to do is sit down and understand all the ramifications. The good news is, whether it's qualified money or non-qualified money, meaning you've paid taxes on it or not, you can still use the same type of plan and not have any tax penalties. Now, there are some situations, depending upon your age, you may have to start receiving required minimum distributions, things like that. But again, that's where it helps to have a specialist sit down with you and go over that as well. So great question. Depending upon your situation, it's an easy process, depending upon whether the amount of money that you have or whether it's in different accounts. It may be a little more paperwork involved, a couple of signatures, things like that. But again, that's what Alexander and their team can walk you through all of that. Very simple and easy to do that way. So again, keep these questions coming. Appreciate those out there. All right, Patricia, if you will email me, so the QR code's not working on your phone, if you'll simply email me at johnjon.green@amba.info, then I will respond back to you and get you in contact with someone. If you'll just also put what county you live in, that way I can assign you or send you to the proper individual out there. We had another question in here that was asked about becoming a member in FREA. It says, do you have to be a local member to be eligible for FREA? We have a lot of at-large members that you can become a member of FREA and not necessarily be involved in your local unit. Now, I highly encourage you to do that, to be involved in your local unit, because oftentimes not only is an opportunity for you to, have community and fellowship with your friends or service opportunities, but there are times, just like after storms come through or during COVID, you want somebody to check in on you, and having that tight-knit community with you is so important. But you can become a member of FREA by emailing me. You can go to the FREA website, become a member at large. And then I imagine that Ann and the crew will try to, at least introduce you to your local chapter and let you know what your options are out there as well. So, all right. Any other questions that are out there? I know that we're running close on time. So, Edwina, is there anything that you want to leave us with from this conversation today?
Well, our organization was started in 1954, and we have learned that if you feed them, they will come. And we have enjoyed our event meetings where it's either a potluck or we meet at a restaurant or go to a wine and cheese tasting locally. And I do encourage people to become a member of FREA at the local unit. We do a lot of wonderful trips. I know in our unit, we've been to Alaska, Europe. They even have a trip planned to Antarctica. So we stay busy. I'm telling you, we know that if you sit in that chair, you will not only retire early and maybe expire early, but we keep busy and we keep smiles on our faces. So I encourage, if you're not a member, to join. And if you are interested, please, John has all of his contact information up there and he can direct you to the right person. But thank you for joining us today. And John, thank you for doing an amazing job.
Well,
we're very pleased.
I apologize for the timing about that, but as far as the technical difficulties, we did have one question, and like I said, I'm not as familiar with this, and Edwina, hopefully you can answer this. Talking about Amendment 3 for teachers. Are you familiar with what, we had a question from Vicki asking about Amendment 3 for teachers.
I'm going to just refer you to look at the Florida people that are putting out nonpartisan information about this. This has to do with a homestead tax exemption, John.
Okay.
And there's some positive and some negative points of this. One of the positive things is that teachers would receive an extra homestead exemption. One of the negative points is that it would create a shortfall of like $84 million a year, which will have to be made up by those that do not receive the tax exemption. So there are good sides and bad sides, but I'm going to ask you to look at your local League of Women Voters. They put out information on this and on all of the 3 amendments that are being proposed. And I encourage everyone to vote. Please, that is your voice. Don't let them quieten our voices in the state of Florida. So be involved and vote. And I have to remain nonpartisan because I am a member of FREA and I represent everyone. So I will give you the positive and negative as I have heard it, but I'm not recommending or dissuading you from voting your mind on that.
Great. Thank you, Edwin. I appreciate that question. Again, this is exactly why we have these webinars, to keep issues like this, especially around voting time, in the forefront for members, as well as bringing education to you as well. So I'm going to hang on the line here. If you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, Q&A. I'm going to stop recording, and thank you very much for your time here. And I think Ann's popping back on here. Ann, do you want to address Amendment 3, or do you want to share something the group, or do we catch you off guard?
Amendment 3, I'd have to think about because I don't have it in front of me. The reason I jumped back on is I just got an email from one of the participants. They're not able to use the chat, John. It only goes to hosts and panelists.
Okay.
Is there a way to fix that?
Let me see if I can undo that. I apologize. Let's see if everyone can do that
Okay.
now. If not, if you go drop it into Q&A, or what I'll do here, let me stop recording. Let's try another round.